Hey guys, what's up? Today I'll be finally ranking all Fire Emblem titles from worst to best, including the Japanese exclusives. With no spin-offs, only main titles, alright? Let's begin! First on the list is Fire Emblem Engage. So I finally put some real hours into the latest entry in this series, only to die out of embarrassment. From the trailers over a year ago, I could tell it was going to suck. It looked bad, but I didn't know it would be this bad until recently. The gameplay is fine though, traditional grid-based combat with several characters, some being able to fuse with protagonists of previous Fire Emblem games for special skills or more damage. You also have a base of operations like a castle with a plethora of things to do, like training minigames to get a status buff on the next battle, or change your rings so other characters can equip them, or inherit skills, or get sub-characters from the series that act as status buffs when you equip them. You can also polish your rings to increase your bonds, yeah. Also, you can explore the towns you liberate to talk to your allies, gather materials, and adopt animals, yeah. So, yeah, the gameplay's fine, nothing outstanding though, but the story completely annihilates everything. It's beyond terrible with modern political garbage, cringe-worthy dialogue, and ridiculous characters. I mean, look at this! It's freaking horrible! This game is a disgrace to the series, and by far the worst of them all. Next is Fire Emblem Fates. This is a trilogy of games, each consisting of a different route. The game's got the same problem as Engage though. Alright gameplay, nothing great, but really bad story. It's no wonder both games share the same stupid writer, one Nami Komodo, and the same producer, previously just an artist, who understands nothing about Fire Emblem narrative. It's got one big ass joke of a cast, a crybaby protagonist, terrible dialogue, and nonsensical storytelling. Years ago I used to stand up for this game, but I never did a great job because deep inside I knew it was bad, at least in terms of story. And no, it's not like one of those three routes is better, they all suck the same, especially the digital-only release, Revelations. Unlike Engage though, I do recommend getting at least one, play through it, and try to survive the cringe in storytelling if you can. Moving on to Thracia 776. This is the hardest Fire Emblem in existence. Never released outside Japan, but it's been fan-translated since forever. Honestly, it's one of the best titles in the series because of the map design, with incredible creativity and the mature narrative, but it's also one of the worst because it was rushed, ruined by a really evil RNG, resulting in an unforgiving and masochistic adventure. It was written and designed by the creator of the series himself, Shozo Kaga. Its release was bizarre to say the least. First published through the Nintendo Power Flash cartridge in 1999, yeah, what the hell is that? Well, this was an add-on that you could use on the Super Famicom to download games. The following year, it got its regular release, so by that time, the SNES was already out, the 64 was also on its way out, and the PS2 was just around the corner, just like the GameCube. It's a direct sequel to Genealogy of the Holy War, but the story and gameplay were rushed, despite getting positive reviews from critics in Japan. I'm a big fan of the game, I suffer through it painfully, but sadly I just can't recommend it. It feels broken and almost unplayable at some areas. Hopefully it will get some kind of modern remake or remaster one day, fixing the balancing and RNG issues. Next is The Binding Blade. Finally, we'll talk about the good games in the series. This is another one that never left Japan, also fan-translated. It's the first of the Game Boy Advance trilogy, but by far the worst of them all. It's still good though, it just has many difficulty spikes and a weaker narrative. Not a bad story, just lacking in development and excitement like its successors. Yes, this is where Roy first appeared, but honestly, he's a bit of a boring protagonist with not much to say. It still has an interesting cast of characters in both plot and combat though, and some of the maps are well crafted and designed to offer a balanced challenge. Most of the time, unlike others that are punishing and straight up ridiculous. Apart from that though, it's still worth playing and I do recommend it. Moving on to Awakening. This game came as a surprise when people were fearing the series was over. You could say it saved it, but it also threw it into a different direction. The gameplay is great with solid map design, balanced difficulty, getting more challenging as you advance. It's got good pacing too, and it never feels boring no matter what. Sadly, the story is kind of a mixed bag. It goes dark and mature when it needs to, but most of the time you're rated by nonsensical or cheesy dialogue. Nonsensical primarily because there are some dumb science fiction elements where you can travel through time and recruit your own grown-up kids. I mean, what the heck? Really? This in a Fire Emblem game? Half of the cast is interesting, memorable, and lovable, while the other half lacks in originality, falling into an unraveling web of annoying cliches. Love it or hate it though, it's still a very solid title in the series and very recommended to play. Next, Genealogy of the Holy War. Also known as Fire Emblem 4, this is yet another one that stayed in Japan. As you can see, fans translated it a long time ago. The game's got 2 arcs with 4 maps each. Sounds short, right? Except every map takes freaking forever to complete, almost as if it was 3 or 4 long regular maps in one. You do get to control tons of characters though, more than in most Fire Emblem games. Story's great, developed with maturity and some harsh plot twists here and there. Gameplay's brutal, not in Thracia levels, but almost, more like in Binding Blade levels. Broken ass difficulty spikes will be there for sure. However, it's still a blast to play with a more forgiving RNG and a variety of strategies to move forward. The music's also incredible here, some themes are just as great as in Thracia or Binding Blade. This is definitely recommended, still not one of the best in the series. I do hope it gets a Western release someday in any form, with rebalanced difficulty, but with the current localization madness, I doubt we will get it with a faithful translation. Next is Shadow Dragon. This is a full remake of the very first Fire Emblem in existence, the one on the Famicom that never came out of Japan until a few years ago, digitally on the Switch. That version is fine, but it aged poorly and I'd rather rank this remake instead. It's great, with good pacing, interesting characters and awesome gameplay mechanics. It's quite difficult, not as challenging as the Japan-only titles, but very tough nonetheless. It also has some weird sprite work that doesn't look that pretty to be honest, and an art style that was criticized, especially the character design. Not sure why, I kinda dig it. Also, the story was left almost intact, which means it's basically a Famicom level of narrative, with not much to work with for the characters. It centers in Marth, a few important NPCs, and that's it. So yeah, it's lacking a bit, but whatever the case, this is a fantastic game. Moving on to Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. Yet another remake here, this one based on Fire Emblem Gaiden, released on the Famicom only in Japan. Thankfully, this remake made it overseas on the 3DS for everyone to play, and it's excellent. Playing with 2 protagonists, simultaneously switching between them to fight on different maps, with great design. It also featured free traditional RPG exploration in dungeons to get into random battles, with short maps to grind and find treasure. Story was expanded and dialogue seems better, but again, it's based on a story designed for Famicom players, so don't expect the best plot ever here. Still, it worked perfectly well with what they have, just added some dumb slice of life dialogue that wasn't necessary. Whatever, it's still a great game to play. I wouldn't complain if the other Japanese exclusives got a remake in this very same style. Next is Three Houses. Three Houses came as a huge surprise for me in a time when I had lost faith in the series. Story-wise, we had gotten Fates and Awakening before it, and I thought for sure the writing had gone to hell. Of course, this one came along written by 3 people now unrelated to the others. Do you see the problem with the series now? Almost every title has got a different writer, often different producers too, and directors. That's why they all feel so damn different, with some being straight up bad. Not 3 Houses, thankfully. It temporarily saved the narrative, despite also including some school simulation full of slice of life shenanigans. I don't mind that as long as the plot stays mature, interesting and compelling. The game has 2 arcs and the second one is impressive. No matter what though, you have to choose one of the 3 houses to align your silent protagonist with, meaning 3 different routes and endings. This is a must play in my opinion, one of the best in the series. Moving on to New Mystery of the Emblem. This is the direct sequel to Shadow Dragon, also remade for the Nintendo DS, because Fire Emblem was never popular in the West until Awakening came out, and because Shadow Dragon wasn't commercially successful, Nintendo never bothered bringing this second remake overseas. Sad, cause it's honestly much better than its predecessor. I don't know why I found the characters, the narrative and the plot more compelling and better written. Ironic considering your character is customizable here, but they have a personality. I also felt the gameplay and maps more fun to play, still quite challenging but extremely addicting. In terms of music, art style, graphics and the overall design, it's honestly more of the same, just better like I mentioned. Probably because it was based on a Super Famicom game this time. Strongly recommended this one, it's the last Japanese exclusive we'll see today. Next is the Sacred Stones. The third game in the GBA trilogy, but completely standalone in terms of story. You play as either Erica or Ephraim, both having their own unique route and party until they merge halfway through the game. Great story with a few unexpected twists here and there, some dark fantasy elements were added as well, including monsters and enemies you fight in some maps. The layout design is neat as hell, with some incredible well thought out parts. It's a very tough video game with some nasty spikes in a couple of maps, but thanks to the Tower of Valny, a place in which you can train your units endlessly, it can be broken pretty easily. This is a masterpiece, just like the rest of the games in this list. Next, Radiant Dawn. This one's a direct sequel no one ever asked for, but there were some plot holes left to be explained, so Intelligent Systems made it. And they did a great job with the design. I wasn't expecting to have a first bundle of new characters as protagonists, only to meet up with the cast of a previous game halfway through. The story's excellent, but I do want to admit that when everything is explained to you, including the ending, it can be kinda cringy. But the rest of the narrative is perfectly executed. It's one of the hardest games in the series, leaving the Japanese exclusives aside of course, because Nintendo made an error in the localization. Easy and normal are the only difficulty settings, but in reality it's normal and hard. However, playing it on easy, which is the real normal mode, can still be beyond challenging, so be prepared. Moving on to the Blazing Blade. The second game in the trilogy of GBA titles, this one acts as a prequel to the Binding Blade. Strangely, a lot more effort was put into the story and characters this time, and it felt like the better game by far. Incredible soundtrack accompanies this game with 2 arcs, each with a different protagonist. It's such a memorable strategy RPG, and the first one in the series to come out of Japan. I love the gameplay design, the creative maps, the difficulty is just right, rarely does it ever feel unfair with almost an impeccable RNG system. Find a way to play this game, man, you won't regret it. And my number 1, Path of Radiance. Of course, it's been my number 1 Fire Emblem for years, tons of nostalgia, the first in the series I ever played and fell in love with. I think the transition from 2D to 3D was outstanding because it stayed true to the formula, the gameplay mechanics and the animations during battle. Sometimes a game in 3D can feel like a step backwards in video game series, but this was definitely a step in the right direction. Story doesn't take long to pick up and hook you into an everlasting tale of intrigue and political issues from within the universe. It's very well told with memorable characters and tons of really badass units at your command. It's a shame the game's ridiculously expensive nowadays, and Nintendo refusing to re-release it on Switch will make most of you stay away from it, but if you can get your hands on it, I strongly suggest emulation, as it is a must, absolutely must play. And that's my ranking of the entire mainline Fire Emblem series. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!